Holy shit, it's finally here. It's a great day because in this video, we are talking about all things Titan LT. Before we jump into all the badassery of Titan LT, let's first set the stage for why this is an important product. We'll rewind to January 2017, and MotoCrane has just launched their very first remote arm system, which actually included its own 3-axis stabilized remote head. And just a couple months later in March, DJI would introduce the Ronin 2, which came as a huge relief to us at MotoCrane, because we could finally focus on the remote arm part of the equation, while the Ronin 2 supported the needs of our customers with a compact stabilized remote head that would pair well with our systems. And over the years, MotoCrane arms have gotten more capable, but the Ronin 2 never got an upgrade. And so we've had a front row seat to all of our customers pushing the Ronin 2 to the limits in dynamic applications. And unfortunately, we've all seen the photos of what happens. The R2 fails catastrophically. So it's left a lot of people without something that they can truly trust. So obviously, when we launched Titan last year, we had hundreds of Ronin 2 users messaging us asking for their Titan, something that offered the robustness of the mechanical structure, the IP rating, the strength of the motors, but in something in a more compact form factor that better suited their payloads and their workflow. So it's exciting because we finally have that, and it is here with Titan LT. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of all the details of Titan LT and what makes it an amazing stabilized remote head. For that, I'm going to pull in a Ronin 2 so we can kind of compare and contrast why LT is so much better for customers that are trying to get the most out of their stabilized remote head. The first obvious difference between Titan and LT is the size, which we've reduced by about half. So the form factor is much more familiar to someone coming from something like the Ronin 2. Yet, the build volume of LT is still 20% larger than a fully roll-arm extended Ronin 2. So for those that deal with larger payloads, it's a lot easier to get those in and balanced with LT. And even if you start requiring a lot of counterweight, the structural stiffness is there where you're not worried about getting into the danger zone of bending roll arms and breaking things like with the Ronin 2. The next factor to compare between LT and the R2 is dry weight, and the Ronin 2 actually wins in this category. In all of its lightweight carbon fiber construction, a Ronin 2 only weighs about 13 or 14 pounds with the battery sled and TB50s installed. And the only application that really matters for is for handheld. But for all of our customers that are using Ronin 2s as remote heads, that's where the additional 4 pounds is really, really meaningful in terms of what we've added with that weight. Now, we couldn't talk about these two without talking about payload capacity. And this is where a lot of people have a bone to pick with DJI, who advertises a 30-pound payload capacity for the Ronin 2, which really means that you can run 30 pounds in some applications. In MotoCrane, that's not how we rate our systems. And so when we say 40 pounds, that means you can run a 40-pound payload in any application. And it's an important distinction between how MotoCrane rates their systems and other manufacturers rate their systems, where we understand what goes into dynamic applications like black arms and remote arms, off-road, etc. And that's really because we've designed this thing with the same attention to stiffness like we have with Titan. And we can even see that as I push down on LT compared to pushing down on the Ronin 2. There's just a lot more flexibility in that structure. So with a real payload capacity of 40 pounds and a 20% larger build volume than the Ronin 2, we know that LT is going to get stuffed with some massive payloads. And we've thought about that in our motor design. In fact, we have a brand new proprietary motor design in LT that yields 3.5 times more peak torque than the Ronin 2. So why is that important? Well, if you're someone that's ever put a massive payload in a Ronin 2, you felt on the joystick or wheels how sluggish it becomes and how whip pan performance and responsiveness degrades. But with all of that torque on LT, you maintain all of that crispness in response on the joystick and wheels, and you also have a much, much higher rated wind speed. The other critical factor of peak motor torque is how fast you can go before aerodynamic imbalance overcomes the maximum amount of torque that you might have on any particular axis. Now, DJI rates the Ronin 2 for 70 miles an hour of wind speed, but if you're building your payloads out larger, you're oftentimes putting a matte box out on the front of the lens, and that can act as a wind sail, and so you might not ever see that 70 mile an hour rated wind speed. But with LT, we have 3.5 times as much peak torque available, which means even if you are building out a large payload and you're running a matte box, we regularly see stabilization performance in excess of 120 miles an hour. Even at lower speeds of, say, 30 to 40 miles an hour, that maximum motor torque is still important because that's the power that's being used to to make sure that the camera stays locked on to its stabilized target. So in the presence of something like a bump in the road or a gust of wind, that motor torque is making sure that the image stays rock solid versus being jostled or seeing a vibration in the image. So if you're a Ronin 2 user and you made a common practice of mounting your R2 at the back of the car using the vehicle to sort of break the wind in front of the R2, you can now, with LT, mount it anywhere, front of the car, on top, wherever you want, and operate confidently knowing that under 130 miles an hour, you're gonna have rock solid stabilization. One of the great successes we had with Titan is in the IP65 rating that we've achieved, which means that it's essentially water resistant and you can operate in pouring rain. We're really proud to have also achieved that same IP rating for LT, meaning that you can take this into inclement weather like pouring rain or snow or dirt or mud and only have to worry about bagging the camera. This is a huge pain point for Ronin 2 customers because you had to seal all of the rotating joints, and even then, with exposed circuit boards on the inside, you oftentimes had moisture-related failures. For me personally, the allure of a great stabilized remote head is how hard I can push it off-road or at high speeds on a racetrack. I'm a car guy, so I love putting LT onto a race car and capturing the energy of really, really high speeds. Now, if you've put the Ronin 2 into that same scenario, you know it has GPS and it also has a standard MEMS IMU sensor providing the stabilization solution, which works okay. With LT, we've actually borrowed the exact same hardware that we're using on Titan. So we're using the same GPS antenna here, which has a much larger ground plane than that found on the R2. So that's going to give you higher satellite counts, which means that the position is going to be much more accurate for the stabilization solution. We're also using our Gen 2 sensor fusion that was just updated last month in a firmware update. So the precision of the stabilization with LT is going to be much higher than something like you're going to get on the Ronin 2. And that's because the quality of the sensor as well as the sensor fusion. We have a design philosophy at MotoCrane, and it is to integrate and simplify on behalf of the operator as much as possible. If you've ever been tasked with single-man opping the R2, you have to bring in some third-party lens control system like the tilt-a-nucleus, which has been a cost-effective solution since it came out. If you want to provide 24 volts power for the new Alexa 35, you have to modify your Ronin 2 to draw power from the LiPos directly in order to do that. What we've done with LT is integrated all of that into the base bar right here. You have your video feed, which of course is running through slip rings externally, so you can always run hardwired video. You also have your 24 volts power for the Alexa 35, Venice 2, and other camera bodies that require 24 volt power. And then you have three latching LEMO ports here for 12 volts power. You have a camera control port for any kind of camera control protocol that we add in our firmware library. Currently, we support Red RCP. Last and most importantly, in my opinion, is 3-channel lens control, so focus, iris, and zoom. And this is compatible with not only our MotoCrane lens control motors, but also our growing list of third-party compatible motors like Hedon, Preston, Arri, Red Rock, etc. So just like choosing whichever lens control motor is best for you, we also want you to choose whichever power solution is best for you. The Ronin 2, of course, was only able to be powered from DJI's TB50 batteries until we at MotoCrane solved that problem with Revolt. And we've shortcut that problem altogether with LT. So you can choose any compatible 48 volt power source that you want. Most commonly, LT is going to be used with the Titan battery, but a really cool thing that we've added are these power expansion plates on the pan housing. When you pull these off, you have automatic connectors underneath, much like the power hub that you've seen on the Ronin 2 here, but that allows for modular power expansion. And we also have a TB50 battery plate accessory that allows you to power LT off of 2 TB50s, which we use in series to get up to that 48 volts. This is also an opportunity for us to add more accessories in the future, things like power conversion solutions, or ways to power accessories that you want mounted to the pan housing, like transmitters. But again, we're all about modularity, and that extends all the way to power. There are some shooting environments where you just have to operate wirelessly, and you can do that on LT just like you can the R2. But there are some other situations where operating with a hardwired connection is really beneficial. And unfortunately, you just can't do that with the included Ronin 2 controller. With the Titan controller, of course, we have a COM port right on top, so it's as easy as just adding a cable between the controller and the pan housing of Titan. And then you have a dropout-free and latency-free connection for controls. So in the name of not introducing unnecessary proprietary things, we're also not introducing a new camera mounting situation here. The LT base bar is compatible with the R2 base plate. So if you have a horde of R2 base plates like third-party options from CineMill that allow you to mount counterweights and things like that, that will work directly from an R2 into an LT. And another way that we've reduced the amount of time that it takes to go from an R2 expert to being an LT expert is putting axis locks and balancing knobs in all the same locations. And at the rear of LT, just like on the R2, you're gonna find a screen for adjusting settings and configurations. Well, I'm super happy that I never have to use this ever again. Shout out to Pedro at CineMill for making the control panel and making this disjointed experience as good as possible. This was a great solution to kind of have a more fully featured interface. But we've gotten rid of the need for something like this, and we've built the Titan controller, which we believe is the best gimbal controller that's ever been built from the perspective of user interface, simplicity, all the features, and the ability to make it an operator experience all your own. So let's take a walk through the Titan controller and see how the user interface and all of the features that we built into this control desk benefit the operator experience. I'll start by turning it on here. We get a cool Titan LT splash screen that's unique to this firmware build. And then we go to the home screen, which gives us our main page options for navigating any of the settings and configurations for LT. We have a tuning menu here, and this of course gives us the ability to adjust anything that's tuning related, which is the stabilization control loop for LT, and also choose and build custom presets for tuning as well. And then we also have a control page so that you can configure how the joystick feels when you're using that for controlling pan, tilt, or roll. So these are settings like smoothing and deadband and expo, so you can make the joystick feel exactly how you want as an operator. And of course, then you have also your speed settings up here for pan, tilt, and roll as well. So when you're using the joystick, you control how fast or slow those axes move. And in Fizz, this is where we go to configure the 3-channel lens control system on LT. So you can see here that I have 3 motors that are connected, and you can see them alongside of this Zeiss 15-5-45 lens here. And we have the models are MotoCrane motors. But if we wanted to change that, we could go into configure and we could select any of the motors from the compatible list of third-party motors there. We'll go back and we'll do a calibrate here. We'll let those motors run for a second, and then we'll have control over all 3 lens axes. Now, monitor is like the dashboard for LT. This is where you go to see how a joystick range is working. It's kind of like you're looking under the hood, looking at encoder values, all of the metrics for how a system is performing. We also have a scope feature, which allows you to look at the gyro rate for any of the 3 axes individually. So you can see there I'm moving pan, I can also move tilt or roll, and we're able to visualize the gyro stabilization in real time while we're making tuning adjustments. So a really powerful feature, and we're actually operating wirelessly right now. So some heads actually lose that functionality when you go to a wireless communication situation, but we actually have that being carried over in the data wirelessly. Now, when we launched Titan last year, one of the first things that a lot of people asked for was, does it have a built-in shake generator? And at the time, it didn't. But within the couple of months from when we launched to when we went to CineGear last year, we built a shake generator function. So this is where the dedicated menu is for the shake generator. Of course, you can configure that for any of the 3 axes. So you can have a combination of pan and tilt or just roll, and then master levels here as well. You can also assign turning this on or off to a hotkey, and I'll show you that in channel mapping. And then we have wheels here. Now you can see that I have 3 wheels, and they're all doing a slow, steady green blink, and that means that none of them have been assigned. So currently, if I bring motors on, I'm using the joystick to control pan, tilt, and roll. But if I wanted to configure the wheels, I can very easily go to that wheel setting, and then I can assign one of my wheels to pan, I can assign one of the wheels to tilt, and then I'll assign this 3rd wheel right here to roll. And now I have pan over here, I have tilt right here, and then I have roll as well. And then I have my hotkeys here to return back to home. We also have the ability to add mechanical drag on each of the wheel modules themselves, and then adjust the speed, of course, or the gear ratio of the wheel. We also have a pause button on here, so if you hit the status button at any time, it basically kills the wheel so that the rate is stopped. If you need to get out of a car or something like that, you don't want an operator to potentially bump the wheel, you can just turn those on and off as you please. So within the wheels page, it's very easy to assign and configure the wheels to the operator's preference. This is also where you'd go to configure the Noto wheels when we add compatibility with those later this summer. In the camera page, this is where we make use of that cam port that you saw on the LT base bar. And this is where we'd start a link with any of the compatible cameras that we have protocols for. Of course, we'll be adding to the library of compatible bodies like those from Arri and Sony as time goes on and we develop more protocols. And in system, this is where we do some low-level configuration and setup of LT. I'd mentioned channel mapping several times here, and this is where we get to assign wherever any of the axes or certain commands or controls are mapped on the controller. So you can see here I have a focus wheel installed, but what I want to do is I want to actually install this single axis joystick because I have a DP that wants to control zoom on this instead of the rocker. I'm going to turn off the controller and I'm going to remove these 4 screws holding in the focus knob, and I'm going to take the focus knob out and then just put my single axis joystick in its place, making sure that my gold pins here are aligned, and then just fasten it in place. So now when I go to channel mapping, it's going to detect that I now have a joystick installed and it's a single axis joystick. And so I can go in here and assign any of those lens control axes that I want. And now I have control over the lens with this joystick. So now I have pan and tilt here on the wheels, and then I have lens control on a new joystick here. So very easy to change out those modules however you want, and then remap any of the commands or the axes to those new input modules. Down here, I also have some hotkeys. So these are user 1 and user 2. So currently my user 1 is set for center all axes, so I can press that and it will return back to everything being leveled off. I can also assign things like level roll axis or turning on or off that shake generator look we saw earlier. And then configuring limits, this is where we're going to configure range of motion limits for pan, tilt, or roll. So if you have, say, a big matte box and you are going to make contact somewhere as you're utilizing the full range of motion, you can limit that to prevent any kind of collisions. And then here we have calibration. So we can calibrate anything that's on the controller, like those joysticks, to make sure that we're getting the full range and the true recentering 0 for any of those installed modules. We can also control controller brightness here. So if you're in a dark arm car, and the screen is just too bright, you can turn that down. It's a really nice feature. And then down here, we have all of our IMU calibrations. So basically a full suite of calibrations so that you don't have to send units back in for completing factory calibrations as you might need to. And then in overrides, this is a really helpful part of the controller. I don't need to bring that unit down to go touch the buttons to go turn it off. In overrides, I can actually power off the system from the controller. And even when it's turned off, as long as I have power connected to the unit, I can actually power it back on remotely. And I can arm the motors, and we are back online. So super helpful when you have a remote operating situation where you don't have to gain access to the head to power it on or off. So that was just a really quick walkthrough of the LT and the controller and this whole awesome ecosystem that we've just launched today. If you guys have any questions about LT, about moving from the Ronin 2 or another ecosystem and getting some of the benefits that we've built into the LT ecosystem, please get in touch. We're really excited about this product and we can't wait to see what everyone makes with it. I'm Zach from MotoCrane. Thanks for watching.